Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to listen to a new episode of Legends of the World, The Legend of the Golem.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're venturing into the age-old, yet still really relevant story of the Golem.
Right.
This figure from Jewish folklore, well, it's captured imaginations for centuries, and you still see its echoes, everywhere in modern culture, books, movies, even sparking these fascinating discussions about artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. And as you know, our goal here is always to get right to the heart of a topic quickly, thoroughly, uncover those real aha moments without getting, bogged down.
Exactly.
For this one, we've pulled together a really diverse set of sources. We're looking at the Golem historically, culturally, through literature, film, and we even stumbled upon a pretty unexpected connection in, of all things, a travel blog about Albania.
Huh. Okay, interesting. So our mission then for this deep dive is to really unpack the Golem, all its facets.
Right.
We want to understand its mysterious beginnings, trace how it's changed through all the retellings, and kind of reveal its surprising relevance today. Creation, responsibility, artificial life, that whole area. Okay, so where does this story actually begin? What are the roots?
Well, the genesis of the Golem idea, it lies deep within Jewish mysticism, often tied to Kabbalistic practices, the belief in the power of sacred words, rituals.
Okay.
The core concept is an animated being, usually human-shaped, brought to life magically from something inanimate, typically clay or mud.
Right. And the big name associated with this, the most famous creator, is Rabbi Judalo ben Bezalel, the Maharil of Prague.
That's him, late 16th century. He's definitely the most famous Golem creator in the folklore. The story goes he created one to protect the Jewish ghetto in Prague from anti-Semitic attacks back then.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
Protector born from the earth itself.
It really is, and the traditional methods for, animating it, they involve these intricate rituals, chanting Hebrew incantations. A really key element often involved writing the Hebrew word for truth, which is emet, on the Golem's forehead.
Amen.
And here's the really clever part, or the crucial part, I guess. To deactivate it, you just erase the first letter, which changes emet into met, meaning dead.
Wow, just one letter. That's incredible power. So this being, immense strength, totally obedient, what else defined it?
Well, typically, incredible physical strength, unwavering obedience to its master. But crucially, it was generally shown as unable to speak or think independently. It just acted solely on instructions. Imagine the complexity, having something so powerful that, can't grasp nuance or ask why.
That's a fascinating paradox, like immense power but zero agency almost. And the legend, it kind of lives on in Prague itself, doesn't it, in the synagogue?
It does, yeah. Legend says Rabbi Lowe, knowing the potential danger maybe, forbade anyone except his direct successors from ever going into the attic of the old new synagogue.
Okay.
That's where the Golem's body supposedly rested.
Yeah.
There's this well-known story about a later rabbi, Yekeskel Landau. He tried to go up, but apparently he retreated almost immediately, really shaken up, respecting Rabbi Lowe's original warning. There's something about that forbidden attic idea, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It taps into that human curiosity about the hidden, the unknown, maybe a little bit of fear mixed in. But what about, actual proof? Did anyone ever find anything?
Well, that's where legend and history get a bit blurry. When they actually did renovations on the synagogue attic back in 1883, nothing. No trace of the Golem was found. Which, of course, just fuels more speculation, right? There are other legends. Maybe it secretly moved, buried in a graveyard in Prague's Yushkov district, where the big TV tower is now. Some more recent stories even whisper about, a Nazi agent trying to get into the attic and meeting a sticky end. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the attic, still off limits to the public today.
So from these, mysterious, almost hidden origins, the Golem story clearly struck a chord. It evolved, branched out.
Absolutely. And a really central theme, one that keeps coming back, is that duality. It's created as a protector, right? But it often carries this potential to become destructive if control is lost.
That tension. The savior turning into a threat.
Exactly. It's a powerful undercurrent. That classic idea that power needs careful handling. Storytellers love that theme.
Yeah, you see that everywhere. And it wasn't just confined to Prague or even just Jewish folklore, was it? You mentioned other echoes.
Precisely. In Yiddish and Slavic folklore, you find this character called the clay boy. It kind of blends the golem idea being made from earth with something like the gingerbread man motif.
Okay, interesting blend.
Often, it's a lonely couple creating a child from clay, and things go sideways. Sometimes comically, sometimes not so much. There's a Russian version, for instance, where this clay boy just grows and grows.
Oh dear.
Eats all the food, the livestock, and then even his own parents, before eventually being outsmarted by a goat, apparently. Talk about unintended consequences.
Wow. That's a pretty dark turn. So, okay, the Prague Golem is the famous one, but this core idea, artificial creation, things going wrong, it resonated across cultures.
Yeah.
And then it moves into literature proper.
Oh, definitely. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is like the immediate obvious parallel.
Right.
Not technically a golem, but Dr. Frankenstein creating artificial life, the massive ethical questions, it's strikingly similar.
Both exploring humans kind of overreaching.
Exactly, reaching beyond normal limits. And both stories really serve as warnings, don't they? Dr. Frankenstein himself warns against challenging nature's laws. That theme of hubris, it's strong in both. It makes you think, what specific anxieties do they tap into? Maybe the golem is about community protection gone wrong, while Frankenstein's creature is more about individual isolation and rejection.
That's a really sharp distinction, yes. Societal versus individual tragedy. What other literary links are there?
Well, there's Carol Lopek's play, R.U.R. Rossum's Universal Robots. Hugely important.
That's where the word robot comes from, right?
That's the one. Another massive exploration of artificial beings and, our complicated relationship with them. And we shouldn't forget Gustav Mehring's novel, The Golem, from the early 20th century. That really cemented its place in literature, often with a more mystical, symbolic feel.
So from ancient legends to these foundational modern texts, the golem idea clearly packed a punch for writers. And then came film.
Oh yeah, Paul Wagner's German expressionist films, they're absolutely seminal. He did The Golem in 1915, then The Golem and The Dancing Girl in 17. But it's the 1921 The Golem, How He Came into the World, that's the really iconic one. Those films with that amazing visual style.
Yeah, the distorted sets, dramatic lighting.
Exactly, they really captured the golem's imposing presence, introduced it to a huge audience. And interestingly, in that 1915 film, the golem had a star on its chest.
A star, that's a potent image. Were there other golem movies later on?
Yes, quite a few, though maybe less famous now. There was a French film in 1936 and a British movie in 1967 called it. They all offered their own takes on the myth.
So it wasn't just books and early film. It even found its way into comics.
It did. And interestingly, Stan Lee himself, Mr. Marvel, he noted that the Hulk has golem-like qualities.
Really? How so?
Well, think about it. The Hulk's constant battle, right? Protector versus destructive force, that mirrors the golem's duality perfectly.
Okay, I see that.
And originally, in his first appearances, the Hulk was actually gray, like he was sculpted from clay or rock.
Wow, I never made that connection. What about Iron Man? Any links there?
It's maybe more subtle, but some people see a connection between Iron Man's arc reactor, the chest piece keeping him alive, and that star on the golem's chest in Wegener's 1915 film.
Interesting visual echo.
Plus, like the Hulk, Iron Man's very first suit was also gray. And beyond parallels, the golem itself actually showed up in Marvel Comics in the 70s, sometimes as a hero, sometimes more of a misunderstood monster figure.
It's amazing how this ancient figure just keeps getting reinterpreted. Speaking of modern takes, I saw something about a discussion online, on Reddit I think, about using the term golem in fantasy settings. What were the different perspectives there?
Yeah, it's a bit of a nuanced discussion. Some folks argue, that creatures from folklore are generally fair game for fantasy writers.
Public domain?
Sort of. Others point out, quite rightly, that the golem has really deep roots in Jewish culture, and using the term respectfully can be a way to, acknowledge that history, a nod to its origins.
Makes sense.
It was also mentioned that, while it started in Jewish folklore, golems are now pretty widely considered part of the general fantasy toolkit.
Yeah.
Often used as that sort of cautionary figure, right? Acting mindlessly based on instructions, showing the risks of that kind of power.
Right, the warning aspect. There was also that mention of Richard Spencer using the term. That feels problematic.
Yes, that's a really important point to mention, though, briefly. Spencer, a white supremacist figure, used golem pejoratively to criticize the media. It really underscores how vital it is to understand the term's origins and the potential for misuse, especially when loaded terms get co-opted. We're just reporting that happened, obviously not endorsing it.
Absolutely, just noting the context. Okay, so All these stories about creating life, artificial or otherwise, it leads us straight to modern AI, doesn't it?
It really does. The parallels between the Golem legend and how we think about AI and robots today are pretty striking.
In what way?
Well, both are essentially created entities, right? Designed for specific tasks, often very capable, powerful even, but lacking that independent will or consciousness, at least initially.
It brings up that huge question of control. We build these smart systems, but how do we make sure they stay aligned with what we want?
That is precisely the kind of problem Isaac Asimov was tackling with his famous 3 laws of robotics.
Right, the rules to keep robots in check.
Exactly. They were designed as a framework, prevent harm to humans, maintain human control. You can see a clear echo of the Golem needing its creator's instructions.
But Asimov's stories often showed the laws failing, didn't they?
They did. He loved exploring the loopholes, the ambiguities. It highlights how incredibly complex it is to try and impose absolute control over any kind of created intelligence. So yeah, this ancient story, it speaks directly to our current anxieties about the power we create, technologically or otherwise, and those unintended consequences we're still grappling with.
And the ethical side, too. The Golem was basically a servant. No rights, no autonomy. We're starting to bump up against similar ethical questions with AI now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Machine rights, that sort of thing.
Exactly right. From, say, a hypothetical AI perspective, Asimov's laws, while seeming protective of humans, also cement a very clear hierarchy. Creator over created, which forces us to ask really big questions about servitude, free will, what consciousness even is in an artificial context. These are all tied up in the long shadow of the Golem story. As one article title put it, The Golem in the Age of Artificial Intelligence.
It really makes you ponder that deep human drive to create. And the Golem isn't alone in that, is it? It connects to a much wider world of creation myths.
It absolutely does. The Golem narrative resonates with creation stories from all over the globe. You think about Sumerian myths, the god Enki making humans from clay, or the Greek myth of Prometheus molding humans from earth. You find similar ideas in ancient China, Egypt, Inca traditions. This idea of humanity coming from the earth is incredibly widespread and powerful.
So this connection being made from Earth, it's a constant theme. What happens philosophically or theologically when humans try to take on that creator role themselves, like with the Golem or Frankenstein?
Well, theologically, philosophically, these stories often dive right into the idea of hubris.
Overreaching ambition.
Right. Humanity trying to step beyond its natural place, maybe even challenge the divine. The Prometheus myth, stealing fire from the gods, that's another classic example of this theme. And the potentially massive consequences when mortals try to play creator.
It feels like we're always balancing this drive to innovate, to create, with maybe an understanding of the responsibility, the danger that comes with it.
Precisely. Which brings us to that fascinating link between creation and, well, inspiration. Genesis 2.7, the biblical account, describes God breathing life into Adam.
Right, the breath of life.
Suggesting that a creation is essentially lifeless without that spirit, that inspiration. On a more secular level, Max Weber, the sociologist, talked about the disenchantment of the world, how increasing rationality strips away mystery. Maybe artists, then, when they create, when they give form and meaning to inanimate stuff, maybe they're trying, in a way, to re-enchant the world.
That's a really cool thought. The artist as a kind of modern golem maker, putting something vital into their work. But where's the line between art, science, and, well, magic?
Ah, that is a wonderfully tricky question, isn't it? What seems like magic in one era often becomes understood science later on. Think about Isaac Newton, giant of the scientific revolution, but also deeply into alchemy, esoteric stuff.
Right.
The artist, maybe like the scientist, works in that creation space. And as Mary Shelley warns so powerfully in Frankenstein, pursuing knowledge, pursuing creation, it demands a profound sense of responsibility.
Okay, now, complete gear shift here. The notes mention something about Albania. Golem Albania. That sounds like it came out of left field.
It did. It's a bit of a curveball. So while our mythical Golem comes from Jewish folklore, Golem is also the name of a resort town.
A real place.
A real place. On the northern part of the Albanian coast, near Durres and Tirana, apparently it's become quite a popular tourist spot. Known for its long, sandy beaches, very family-friendly vibe. It's just a complete coincidence it shares the name.
Huh. A real-world Golem town. What's it like? Is it, Golem-like?
Huh. Not particularly from the sounds of it. The info suggests it's maybe a bit quieter than nearby Durres. Lots of hotels, different kinds of places to stay, many right on the beach.
Okay.
Seems like its main draw is the beach, water sports, that kind of thing. But it's well located for day trips to Durres or Tirana for history and culture. And one travel blog mentioned renting beach chairs and umbrellas is generally cheaper there than down south on the Albanian Riviera. So more budget-friendly relaxation.
That's a fun little detour, a real place sharing the name. Wasn't there another geographical link, too? Something about a mountain?
Yes, that's right. Golem Korab, or Mount Korab. It's the highest peak on the border between Albania and North Macedonia.
Okay.
And in Macedonian, the peak is actually called Golem Korab, which just means Great Korab. So you've got a resort town and a mountain peak, both sharing this name. Another unexpected link, even if it's just coincidence.
Amazing. Okay, so we've gone from mysticism to Albanian beaches and mountains. Let's circle back to the arts, specifically the music for that 1920 Golem film.
Right, the Paul Wegener film, The Golem, How He Came Into the World. Sadly, the original score for it is lost.
Oh, that's a shame.
It is, but when the film was restored back in 2000, a composer named Aljosha Zimmerman wrote a completely new score for it. And studying that score gives us real insight into how music works with silent film.
What's special about Zimmerman's score? What did he draw on?
Well, Zimmerman leaned heavily into Jewish musical traditions. You can hear influences from klezmer music, that vibrant sound, and also the melodies of Yiddish songs.
Okay.
He used the piano trio, so violin, cello, and piano, to create this score that really punches up the visuals. For instance, when things get chaotic, like the palace roof collapsing, the music gets much denser, more forceful. It directly mirrors the drama you're seeing.
So it's not just mood music, it's actively part of the storytelling.
Exactly. And there are these moments where the music almost seems to, humanize the golem, particularly using these really poignant cello solos. In the scene where they're carrying the golem's body, seemingly lifeless, back into the ghetto, Zimmerman uses specific musical scales that are typical of Jewish liturgical music. The Phrygian scale, technically. It adds this whole other layer of cultural and emotional weight.
Wow, sounds incredibly thoughtful.
Yeah.
Any specific musical moments that really stand out?
Oh, several. Just before the golem comes back to life, there's this subtle, almost sneaky rhythm in the music. Builds up the tension beautifully.
Nice.
And then there's a sequence, like a projection shown on the palace walls, and the music there is much more joyful, almost festive. Zimmerman really uses the instruments brilliantly to paint a whole range of emotions. Fear, shock, quiet moments, even lament when the community thinks the golem is gone for good.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it? How many layers there are to this one figure, from ancient folklore to modern film scores.
It really is. The golem is just this incredibly rich, constantly evolving figure. Started as a mystical protector, right? Now it's become this powerful symbol for AI. It sparks cultural debates. Its story keeps wrestling with these huge, timeless themes: creation, responsibility, control, and, the potential dangers of playing God.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of the golem, maybe a final thought for you, our listener. Given how fascinated we clearly still are with the golem, across centuries, across cultures, what does its persistence in our stories actually tell us about our own hopes, our own anxieties, especially regarding technology, creation, and maybe even what it means to be human? Are we basically still grappling with the very same questions the golem legend first raised all that time ago?
It's definitely something to chew on. We'd encourage you, explore some of the different books and films adapting the golem story. Or maybe dive deeper into those philosophical debates around AI. Or perhaps even investigate Jewish folklore and mysticism further.
Or look up Golem Albania.
Ha! Or even that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.